Welcome to Everyday Enlightenment. I'm your host, Patty Teal, and I'm coming to you today from beautiful Sedona Mago Retreat, which is located in the high desert near Sedona, Arizona. I have a very exciting guest today. Her name is Linda Starr Wolf. She's the founding director and president of Venus Rising Association for Transformation, Venus Rising University, and the Shamanic Ministers Global Network. The creator of the shamanic breathwork process, she's the author of 9 books, including Shamanic Breathwork, Shamanic Mysteries of Egypt, and Visionary Shamanism. Best of all, she's going to be coming to Sedona Mago Retreat. As part of the Sedona Recovery Series, she'll be leading Shamanism and Soulful Recovery, February 1st through the 4th in the new year. There's an early bird rate, too. If you register by December 4th, you can get a discount. To find it, go to sedonamagoretreat.org, and you'll find the program under Special Retreats. And again, it's Linda Starr Wolf, and the retreat name is, can you remind me of that again?
Well, it's Soulful Recovery, and we will be focusing on bringing in shamanic breathwork and other shamanic tools to create a soul return for those who participate.
That sounds so wonderful. You have been here before, haven't you?
To the Mago Retreat Center?
Yes.
Oh, yes. I was there. Gathering of the shamans. I was one of the teachers there. In fact, we did a shamanic breath work, and I 110 people that participated in that breath work. So that was an amazing day-long event that we did over a 3 or 4 day period.
Oh, how wonderful. So the book that you sent me to read over called Soul Whispering, it's just been such a delight to read that. Can you try to tell our listeners, I know it's hard to say it briefly, but what is soul whispering?
Well, soul whispering itself really came out of a conversation between myself and my best friend. Sometimes we call ourselves partners in crime. Nita Gage, she's a dear friend. We lived together as friends and colleagues out in California when we were both going through divorces for about 7 years out in California several years ago. And during that time, we were both really working to develop a new way of listening and working with people, because we both have backgrounds in psychotherapy and psychology, and I'm actually an addiction specialist. And we were finding that some of the methods that we learned, I guess you could say traditionally through college and through our traditional training, were not nearly as important, we found, as what we were discovering by working hands-on with people and really learning to show up and be present and listen to people's souls, not just their addictions, not just their diseases, if you will, or their diagnoses, but listening to something else behind that. And we started calling it soul whispering. So when we sat down about 3 years ago and started talking about this book that we had been threatening to write together for a really long time, my late husband, who passed 3 years ago, he was still here at this time, and he was sitting there. He wasn't feeling well, and he looked at both of us and he said, "You two need to write this book. You guys are the experts on this." And of course, he was our biggest fan.
Right.
But, it was out of that, quite frankly, that we started meeting and talking. She still lives in California, and I live in the mountains here in North Carolina, and really developing, like, what is soul whispering? How do we coax the soul to come forward and speak its truth and to get louder, actually, than our egos? How do we get it to speak? And then also, how do we really listen to it? How do we listen to our own? And for those of us who are in the business, really, of serving this planet and serving others, how do we hear it and know when we're hearing it? And why? Why do we want to hear it? You know, that's another important question, is why do we want to hear it? And, you know, for me, the main answer is because it's the part of us that will tell us the truth about ourselves and about each other.
Wow, that is so beautifully said. There was a portion of the book, and I can't remember all the questions, but 2 of them were, how long since you've sung? How long since you've danced?
Yes.
And that just grabs your heart. You go, oh my gosh, it has been a while. And somehow I've gotten separated from my happiness and probably my soul. Would that be a correct assumption?
Absolutely. When we separate from the things that bring us joy, happiness, that make us smile, even when we're alone, I mean, that's the real caliber of happiness. Is how often do we walk around the house with a face that's drawn, or feeling stressed out over looking at the computer, or whatever, or driving in traffic? To notice how often you're smiling. And, music always puts a smile on my face. And also dancing, especially when I'm just dancing for myself or my dogs.
I love to dance with my dog. That's a good one. Yeah. Yeah. So you hear a lot with shamanism about soul recovery. So that really is a big purpose, isn't it?
It really is. And, soul loss, that's become actually a popular term, but, 35, 40 years ago, when some of us started talking about soul loss, nobody really knew what that meant. And somebody said to me one time, is it really possible to lose your soul? And I had to smile, and I'll say, no, I don't think we can lose our soul. There's a lot of things we can lose, but I don't think we can lose our soul. But we can certainly disconnect from some of the things that make us soulful. And to be soulful, the play on words, soul-filled, to be full of soul, what does that mean? If we look at the soul as being the part of ourselves that's juicy, the part of ourselves that gives meaning to life, the part of us that can see beyond our ego needs sometimes. And, we do have ego needs, but to see beyond that so that it's not just everyday rush hour traffic, hamburger stand, fast food consciousness, but this deeper part of our lives. And that if we stop connecting to that part of ourselves, we actually get rusty. It's like anything else that we don't use. If we don't use our muscles, they get flabby, So if we don't use our soul, it just kind of withers away, and it feels as if we've lost parts of ourselves. And we might even walk around and say, I don't know what happened. I used to do this. I used to do that. I can't remember that. Or I just feel like something's missing. And, the doctor's offices, the pharmaceutical companies, not only that even, but even, I'm a big person on supplements, but even the supplements, we can be looking for all these things outside of ourselves, saying a part of me is gone. And that's really a symptom that something is missing at a soul level. And how do we get that back?
Right. And of course, pharmaceuticals can make you feel better, but they can tend to make you numb. And I know as I was reading your book, you sometimes really have to face the darkness or the shadow and work through it. And they may be painful, but afterwards you can kind of have a new life. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes. Well, Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychoanalyst from the early 1900s, who actually passed, I think, in the 1960s, was the one who really, I think, for our era, brought the word and the energy about soul and about bringing parts of ourselves back, about going deeper. But he also said that unless we can own our shadows, and this scares people to hear this sometimes, but to own our dark side, unless we can look at ourselves honestly, because we all have them, no matter how good we try to be. There's a part of us sometimes that, can be up at midnight eating a whole chocolate bar because we just, had too much stress during the day. Mm-hmm. And at an extreme, it could be, the person that's setting up at night by themselves, drinking one alcoholic drink after another alone, or, eating a whole extra large bag of, corn chips, those kind of things. There's so many different ways that we check out. And we do that unconsciously. Sometimes, have you ever had a meal and you're stressed out and afterwards you realize you finished the meal and you don't really fully remember eating it, let alone enjoying it?
Sure.
And then you feel stuff like you feel like you ate too much.
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of things. And who did that? Well, Carl Jung would probably say it was the shadow. There used to be a show years ago with Flip Wilson who'd say, the devil made me do it.
Oh,
The
yeah.
devil made me do it. You know, there'd be a little angel on one side and a little devil on the other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the shadow is not really the devil, but the shadow is the part of ourselves that will come out if we are not taking care of ourselves. The shadow is actually our friend. It will come out and act out. And it will say, pay attention to me. And pay attention that you're not happy. Pay attention that you're anxious or depressed, or not living your truth. Because you're doing things that you don't want to do. You're acting out compulsively, perhaps even addictively, you know, and that's showing you that part of you is missing. The antidote to all of those things is to own that, not deny it. Our culture is so full of denial. We're so afraid of looking at the truth about ourselves. And yet the old adage, you know, that's perennial wisdom, that the truth will set us free. And the truth is in the shadow as well as the light. And I think my favorite thing about working with the shadow, and I've been doing shadow work, my own personal shadow work for 35 years. Really, I have to update that, for 37 years.
Wow.
Personally in recovery. And I came into recovery in 1982. So that's a few years ago. And that's when I first really started looking at my shadow, because I had to. If I wanted to be sober, if I wanted to be free from addiction, I had to come out of denial and say, this is not normal behavior. And you know what's really hard about this, Patty, is that I was already a therapist. I was a counselor. So
Isn't
it was
that interesting? Yeah.
hiding it. So that's the shadow. That's how it comes out.
Right.
But
Well,
I will say one other piece about that real quickly. That is, when we embrace our shadows, we come back into the light.
oh, yeah. I wonder if that's similar to, you know, an addict who keeps having worse and worse and worse consequences. And it kind of reminds me of what you're saying. Pay attention, wake up, until finally they really take a look at what's going on. Would that be a similar scenario?
Completely. And so often, you know, the reason we don't look at the shadow is because we're ashamed. We're humiliated. We're embarrassed. It was very humiliating for me. Imagine to be 29 years old, to be classically trained as a therapist, to be counseling other people, and to be a closet alcoholic in the evening. And I didn't even, you know, people would say, well, you know, how could you do that? And I was like, well, first of all, I didn't know it. I was in denial. I just thought, well, I deserve this. I'm relaxing. I'm taking care of myself. There's nothing wrong with having a few drinks, which, you know, over time, it'd be more than a drink or two drinks. It was, you know, I was buzzed. And so at some point, you know, I was also a very spiritual person.
Right.
I've always been a very spiritual person. It had nothing to do with not being spiritual or aware, you know. But denial is a very strong thing. And it comes from our embarrassment and shame and not wanting to be, obviously, to have an addiction.
Right. Yeah. I can imagine that must have been particularly hard, as you said, because you were a counselor. That was your specialty. I know I can relate to that in a way because I was a teacher and I was a special ed teacher. And when my own kids kind of went by the wayside or they were, you know, just really gave me a run for my money, I'm like, how can this be happening to me? I should be able to do better. So I can relate to that. So what are some of the benefits that people can get from coming to the retreat that you're going to be leading, the Soulful Recovery Retreat?
Well, first of all, we'll create a beautiful, wonderful, connected community. People who tend to want to recover lost parts of their souls, including any parts of their souls that have gotten caught up in addiction, whether it's watching TV all the time, oversleeping, being lethargic, that we can become addicted to anything. You know, extreme cases can be things, you know, I've worked in the field for a long time, but extreme cases can be addicted to, you know, drugs and alcohol or to pornography or to some sort of abuse of some kind, self-abuse, or even abuse to others. And of course, some that we don't necessarily think sometimes are, abuse, but it can be addicted to foods that just don't agree with us. I'm gluten intolerant, and just, I will rationalize occasionally, I can have this gluten, it's not going to bother me this time. And I have to laugh at myself because I'll go a long time without eating it, and it's like I'll convince myself that I can have it, and then I'll suffer for a day or two. So I'm getting better. And
Well, you're only human. Yes.
That's right. I'm only human. Thank you.
Yes.
I truly know we're spiritual beings having a human experience, but oh, brother, are we having a human experience?
Boy, that's for sure. Well, as you describe it that way, it almost seems like all of us would have an addiction of some sort. And then I start to think even maybe OCD could even be thought of as some sort of an addiction in a way. I have a family member that deals with that needs the constant reassurance. So there's just so many things that we typically don't think of as addiction that perhaps have that little inkling of that in it.
Well, addiction releases the feel-good chemicals in the brain. It's not only substance, but there's actions, addictions. So it releases that, a compulsive behavior that makes you feel good, whether it's a substance or an action or a relationship with a person even, can become addictive. And it releases temporarily those chemicals within the brain that says I'm okay or I'm safe or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that, to watch a good movie, go walk with a friend, all those kinds of things. But when we become dependent upon something outside of ourselves repeatedly, and it becomes maybe something really specific, like a person, place, or thing, and suddenly we find that we're non-functional, or we're obsessing about it, or it's affecting us in some way, it has slipped over the line into an addictive behavior. And that can be, Patty, I have found for myself and others, that can be almost anything. And so, the way we replace that, if you will, because you're going to take something away, you've got to bring something back in. And of course, in AA, in the 12-step programs, not just AA, but in the AA where I entered in originally 36 years ago, we said, only the first step of recovery deals with not using a substance. Only the very first step. All the other 11 steps in that 12-step program deal with a new way of learning how to live. And so even though I was a counselor and a spiritual being, there was a part of me that needed some more structure, some more self-discipline, some more inner awareness, and some methods. So a long ways from that original 12 steps, over the years, I've actually developed something called the Shamanic 12 Steps. I developed a process called Soul Return. I developed another process 21 years ago called the Shamanic Breathwork Journey process. So I have been consistently adding tools to my own tool chest that I utilize for my own continued, not only recovery, but discovery. The discovery of life. It's not enough just to recover from an addiction. If that was all it was, I don't know that any of us would continue to practice abstinence from certain things. But the discovery of a whole new life and a freedom from not only addictions, but a freedom to be all that we're here and to really live a soulful life, to be so filled. So at this retreat, we will be using all of these methods that I've developed over the years and expansions of some of the other kind of tried and true traditional recovery methods as well.
And do you help people to find their soul's purpose? Do you feel like people have one main purpose, or maybe one main purpose at different times in their life? Do you help them to discover what that is?
That's one of my greatest joys to do. I feel like I have been on my soul path solidly for 36 years. And not to say that we don't all, fall sometimes or get off balance. That's just part of being human. Like you said, we're only human. But I know for a fact, I can feel it in my body when I say this is a truth, that I have been consciously connected and on my path for 36 years, going on 37 years.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah.
It has been, because you mentioned that I have 9 books. Well, I have 2 coming out next year. I have the university. I've trained people all over the world to do these processes. Literally, I don't even know how many thousands of people. And the main, I guess you could say, goal, or my main sole purpose, is to help liberate people and to help them find on the other side of addictions or compulsivities or anxiety or depression and all those so-called clinical terms, that on the other side of that, what's waiting for them is their soul's purpose. You show me a person who feels like they are on purpose in their lives and they're not going through those experiences. They're like everybody else. They're going to have a bad day. They're going to have a headache. They're going to get cold. They're going to get down, have some anxiety sometimes in traffic. But it's not a constant chronic state of being. And so I do believe that everyone has a soul purpose. And like you said, it can look different sometimes for a period of time. It can shape-shift over the years. But there's one thing it will always feel. It will feel right in your body.
Right.
There will be excitement when you get up in the morning.
Mm-hmm. So that's a very big sign if you are filled with anxiety and angst and you're just not joyful, that somehow you've perhaps gotten off track from your soul purpose. There was a section in the book I loved too where you were working in an office and it looked like a very successful life and place to be, but you describe yourself like feeling almost like a caged animal, like I've got to get out of here. And so, yeah, that kind of unease probably is a very big signal that you're not on your path.
It's really true. My colleague, I mentioned my best friend and co-author, Nita Gage, she's had some pretty high positions in the corporate world, and she wrote quite a bit about it in the book as well as I did. But both of us have had positions of authority and realized that where we were was not where we needed to be. Maybe originally when we started out there, that was a part of the soul purpose, but it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a marriage. My first marriage lasted 20 years. And my ex-husband and I are still good friends today. We got married when we were 20. We were both hippies out of the 60s. Gave birth to a son and raised him. And I'm so grateful for that. And I've had people actually say, well, I'm sorry that your marriage failed. I don't feel like it was a failed marriage. I said, 2 kind of messed up hippies who got married and managed to be married and get sober and live a life and create a beautiful son and help other people in the world. I wouldn't say that was a failure at all. But
Right.
What I would say is that things changed. And there was an unhappiness there because something had come to an end and it was hard to admit that it had changed. Then that's even harder when something still looks okay on the outside, but on the inside, you know that it has ended.
Right, because it's so easy to justify, well, it's not that bad, so you hang in there long past when you should. Even though you've been on your soul path for 36 years, which is wonderful, the fact that you went through rough times as a teenager, late teens, don't you think that really helped you to have an empathy and understanding for what other people go through?
Patty, I don't think you could say that any better. I really don't. When politicians, when the medical professions, the psychiatric or psychological professions, or anyone, just anyone, even a receptionist someplace, when people do not have empathy, it's very difficult to assist other people. I was thinking about, I just called, I'm not going to say who, but I called someone the other day, and their receptionist was very rude. And I was really calling about something medical that I wanted to check on, quite frankly, about my life insurance. And the person was so rude, and it was it was something that was of a personal nature to me. And I didn't say anything at the time, but I hung up, and I had felt very intimidated. And I'm not a person that feels very intimidated very
Right.
often.
Yeah.
I will. But this person was really like that, and I thought, when you're calling about something like this, you're kind of in a vulnerable state. You're looking at your mortality.
Mm-hmm.
My husband passed a few years ago. I was so grateful that he had his cared enough to have the life insurance that really helped me. And I'm looking at that with my children and those sort of things. And I thought about this woman is, she's not exhibiting empathy here in this situation. And when we don't have empathy for others, it's really hard for people to feel safe and to be able to relate to us. So yes, I believe that everything that I've been through, including, I've mentioned it 2 or 3 times, with the passing of my beloved husband that I was married to for 14 years, I have a whole new appreciation for suffering at a whole nother level for someone who is married to someone that they dearly love, that's their soulmate, who goes through the cancer process and leaves the planet. And what the toll takes on the caregiver,
Mm-hmm.
I had not personally experienced that before. And what the person who's going through that so nobly the way he did, with such consciousness, it's just a whole new respect and empathy that I had. I have a lot of empathy, but now I specifically have empathy for that.
Yeah, you have a real deep understanding of it. Well, I want to remind those who have tuned in and are watching that you will be leading Shamanism and Soulful Recovery February 1st through the 4th, that's in the new year, 2018, and that there's an early bird rate coming up in December, so don't wait too long to register for that. It just sounds like it's going to be wonderful. I'm hoping I can peek my head in and certainly at least get to meet you and talk to you. I think you're wonderful. I'm definitely a fan, and the book Soul Whispering also is just incredible because I didn't feel lectured to at all. It's told through these delightful stories, yours and other women's stories, in particular women and men, but it's just a wonderful way to read people's experiences and to see how they transform throughout their lives. It's amazing.
Thank you, Patty. I
Well,
look forward to
thank
getting
you.
back at Mondo. It's such an amazing, beautiful retreat center, and I look forward to meeting you in person and
I
doing
look
a big
forward to that very much too. Thank you so much.
namaste.
Namaste.